Well, I just want to say welcome on behalf of the Kansas Board of Regents, and we thank the Department of Commerce for hosting today one of our partners, Caleb Asher, who certainly has the partnership we've enjoyed, really has helped workforce development and this type of innovation in our state. We thank Ed Mills for his leadership in connecting with business and industry. We know that there really isn't anything we can do, particularly in our technical education programs, without the help of business and industry. So on behalf of the Board of Regents, thank you, Regent Perkins, for being here today, and the Tech Ed Authority. Thank you, Eddie Estes, as well as our legislators. I want to introduce Dan Senstock with the Apple Corporation, and he is going to give a presentation today. We thank you for your support of this program.
Yeah, great. Okay, before I get to the presentation, there's a few things I want to say. First of all, thank you for having us here. Apple, as a company, is always interested in obviously working with schools that have taking the idea of education and delivery of content to another level. One of the things, and I'll give you a little bit of history of myself to kind of figure out why I'm so passionate about this particular element. A longtime educator. I've taught for about 22 years, 25 years almost, right in that space. It becomes one big blur after a while. But I started out as a teacher in the 80s in California. And I was inspired heavily by educators. I've never shared this story with anybody. My wife knows. And a few of my colleagues know. The story I want to share really epitomizes what's happened at Northwest Kansas Tech. And I come from a history of a lot of people in our family. My mother had 13 brothers and sisters. And when my grandfather passed away in 1982, I remember reading the obituary that said, it goes through grandkids, great-grandkids, and so forth. There were 222 complete grandkids. The sad part of that was in 1984 when I graduated from high school, I wanted to go to college, and I graduated in College of Education at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I was the first student out of all of those grandkids to ever go to school. And I was motivated by my educators. The story goes, my parents were divorced and they kind of separated, and I was kind of a lost person as a freshman in high school. And the educators, particularly my English teacher, my basketball coach, my football coach, my track coach, really kind of put their arms around me and didn't coddle me to kind of say, here, you can kind of go, but they really pushed me hard. They really cared, and they transformed learning for me to a point where I was able to connect and take that to become an educator as well. And so I'm really passionate about teaching and learning. I taught in California for a number of years and then taught out in Lincoln. And the reason I bring that up is because every time I've moved to a different position, when I left education and went to the district office to head up the technology for about 35,000 students, I remember one of my colleagues asking me, why did you leave the classroom to go to the district office? Because you know when you go there, nothing ever happened, right? And I said, well, we're going to change that. And I went there because I told them if I can impact 100 students in the classroom, I can impact thousands at the district level. And then I went on to do some teaching at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln a little bit, and Nebraska Wesleyan. And then I finally came to Apple about 5 years ago. I came to Apple as a distinguished educator and working the entire central United States. And my job was to work on curriculum. And again, I asked the same question with my colleagues. Why did you go to Apple as a development executive for the central U.S.? Because I said, look, if I can impact 100 kids in the classroom and 35,000 students at a district level, now I can impact hundreds of thousands of students in the central United States. And what's amazing is when I have conversations with people like Dr. Mills. We were just talking earlier today about some of the highs and lows in my position. And one of the frustrating parts is that there are not more people like Dr. Mills and the leadership staff at Northwest Kansas Tech. I spend a lot of time right now, I cover Nebraska and Kansas higher education only. And I spent a lot of time talking to schools about we really have to rethink what's happening in education. Because we have students who are the most mobile, collaborative learning students we've ever had in the history of education. And we're still teaching them a way that we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And the students have a real hard time with that. And I remember having a conversation with Dr. Mills and the folks at Northwest Kansas Tech about, look, you guys are right on the brink of coming up with something pretty big. You can revolutionize what's happening on your campus, and you can get students really excited about not only what's happening in learning, but you can give them the advantage when they leave here to go into the workplace. And it's similar to a story, and I was mentioning it earlier, and I'll end with this before we get on, there's another school in Orlando, Florida, that reminds me very similar to what's happened at Northwest Kansas Tech, a full transformation of pedagogy and content delivery and collaboration, where the students and the teachers are working together to actually learn what's supposed to be taught. And it is no longer the sage on the stage where the teacher speaks and the student sits at a desk and listens. They're moving and they're collaborating, they're sharing, and they're building together. And it's very similar to a story in Orlando, Florida. When I was teaching, I used to send students to a school called Full Sail. It's in Orlando, and in 2000, when I was teaching a film school, there was about 995 students there. And they got to the point where they really expanded and really understood this idea of collaborative learning. Today, there's over 7,000 students at that school because the students are truly engaged, and they have an 85 to 90% job placement ratio. And I see that same thing starting to happen at Northwest Kansas Tech. There's nothing more proud for me. When I travel around the country, I've been out at Apple headquarters for the last 5 weeks, and every time I'm out there, I have people coming to me and coming up and saying, so tell me about what's going on in Goodland, Kansas. When you have people like Stanford and MIT and Berkeley and Notre Dame and Michigan talking about their space, and then they're also saying in that same breath, but what's going on in Goodland? I want to know what's going on in Goodland. That's a pretty amazing feat, not only for the state of Kansas, but for Northwest Kansas Tech as well. So with that, I could not be more proud than to have this moment. I love moments like this. It's better than any experience I ever have, whether it's working with kids, working with professors, working with presidents, working with Board of Regents, is to be able to step back and say, okay, all that hard work that we have done, all those hours sitting in the room trying to figure out how to put this thing together, all the time in the technology back room trying to figure out how to get the networking to work, when you can step back and say all of that was worth it because you have students who are now learning at a level that they've never learned before, and they are having the advantage over lots of technical schools over the country. And every technical school in the country is asking what's going on in Goodland, Kansas. It's a pretty amazing thing. So with that, I would like to present this award to Dr. Mills and the gracious folks at Northwest Kansas Technical College. This is an award recognized as an Apple Distinguished Program for Innovation, Leadership, and Education Excellence. And I do want you to know that there are only 49 of these given a year, K-20, and there are hundreds that are applying to this. So to be recognized from a company who his entire life is built on education, the company was founded on education, it's a pretty amazing feat. So I'm going to congratulate Northwest Kansas Tech. I could be more proud, and I continue to be excited to look forward and work with more initiatives going forward.
Yeah.